And now, Chapter 34 of The Last Boy on Earth, In the Belly of the Beast. Brady found himself in darkness. He remembered throwing himself from the bridge in an action that would have been suicide for a boy, but a mere trifle for a monster like Grendel. He was sure he had survived the fall, but he was not sure where he was now. He had imagined that possession by the monster would mean cessation of consciousness and self-awareness, but he could move his body and stand up. He could smell and taste and feel and see, but only just. In a moment, he could sense he wasn't immersed in total darkness, and as his eyes adjusted to the light, he could see he was in a sort of cave, and a faint bioluminescence seemed to be emanating from the walls. When he touched them, they were moist and warm. He thought he could detect a thrumming sound around him, and feel a pulsation from underneath his feet. This was a cell, he thought, but not the kind you find in a prison. "Brady, are you there?" he heard a voice say. It was, but it couldn't be. Ben? "Ben, is that you?" he asked, searching his pockets frantically. "Oh, it's good to hear your voice," said the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Brady found the old paperback in his pocket. He wasn't alone. Even though Ben had no body and therefore could not help him escape, there was solace in the knowledge that he had the mind of Benjamin Franklin at his disposal. "Where are we?" asked the old printer. "Inside of Grendel, I think." Brady paused, unsure how the old gentleman would react to his next statement. And then he said, "I allowed myself to be possessed by him." Ben didn't respond for a moment, but when he did, there was a wry note to his voice. "So, if one is going to beat the enemy, one does so either from without or from within, eh? You're planning on infiltrating the enemy camp and striking a death blow from the inside, aren't you?" "Something like that," Brady answered. He started feeling around on the walls, like a mime trying to find a doorway, but the walls were perfectly curved and seamless. He was sealed tightly in this small chamber, away from the rest of the being that was Grendel. "If there is no doorway, make one," said Ben. Brady stopped and considered, and then began feeling around in his vest pockets and on his belt. He had many tools, but he was searching for the one who would work the best, his pocket knife. This just might be the tool needed to escape this oubliette. He went to one of the walls and slowly pushed the blade into it. Surely enough, it responded like flesh, more like cartilage than muscle. Once the blade was through, a simple sawing motion revealed a tight slit through which Brady could move. When he slipped through, the slit healed itself. They were in another place. Not a cell, but the area in between them, the interstitial region. It was more like a meandering hallway with compartments at regular intervals, but with no straight lines evident anywhere. The faint light continued to glow from around him, from everywhere, just enough so that he could navigate. With his knife in his hand, he began the act of entering chambers by incising them with his blade, seeking out the beast. What Brady and Ben found so profoundly odd was that the chambers were not all empty, like the one Brady had discovered himself in moments ago. Some chambers held artifacts, toys and clothing, school books and novels on the floor. There were piles and objects lying around in many of the cell chambers, placed in disarray and left there for some unknown reason. In one room there was a complete set of encyclopedias. In another room there were piles of graphic novels and comic books, and in yet another, what appeared to be walls and walls of video games and music CDs. Some rooms had furniture, and others had boxes and bags. None of them had anything living in them, and certainly there was no evidence of Grendel. "Where'd you get all this stuff?" asked Brady aloud. "I believe we are wandering through its memories," said the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. "Or, should I say, your memories?" The idea seemed ridiculous and plausible at the same time. How could memories be actual things he could reach out and touch? Then again, he asked himself, how could he be a person wandering around inside a place built of fear and pain? "This isn't real," he said to Ben. "You mean that we aren't really here?" "Right. I can't really walk around inside a cell. It's too small. I'm too big, and memories aren't things you can touch." "Are they?" The old scientist took a moment to respond. "I've had the opportunity to spend some time mistakenly shelved next to some fellow named Albert Einstein, and I can tell you he taught me a thing or two. Perhaps this isn't a real place, but a theoretical place, and as such, it is real enough for the moment. Call it a thought experiment." "Theoretical?" asked Brady. "A mental place, a place of the mind, but that doesn't mean it isn't real, Brady. The mind is real. You have one, I have one. My body has been dead for a very long time. So if we are really somehow wandering around in the mind of the monster, then it is a fine labyrinth indeed, but it is most certainly real." Brady considered the words of the patriot carefully. "Labyrinth, huh? Like the one Theseus entered in Crete to slay the Minotaur?" "Yes, exactly. That's the spirit. You're Theseus, and the beast within this labyrinth is the Minotaur. 'Tis a good metaphor, and apt. Remember, lad, there's always a monster, and he always hides in his lair. Without this, there can be no hero." Brady cut himself into chamber after chamber, always working his way down the hall. In one chamber he found children's toys, a big wheel, a red wagon and a rattle, G.I. Joes and Star Wars plastic lightsabers. In yet another chamber, a movie was playing against a cell wall. How it was projected was unclear, but it was definitely a movie in black and white with no sound. It was a tall man with a bowler cap and a silly grin, and a taller, fatter man dressed in a similar fashion. They were trying to push a piano up a long set of stairs and having very little success. Brady found himself staring at it, distracted by it for a few moments, before Ben asked him where they were and what they were doing. "Oh, sorry, I was watching a movie. I love this one. They're called Laurel and Hardy. They're trying to get this piano up a long set of stairs," Brady answered. "An enemy that knows what distracts us can use that knowledge to thwart us from our first purpose," replied Ben. "He tricks you by showing you things you wish to linger over." "I know, it's just that I remember some of these things. I lost most of them. So now I can see them, touch them again. It feels good." "Brady, one today is worth 2 tomorrows." He begrudgingly moved away from the movie on the chamber wall. How could a being of hatred and enmity be made of such things as toys and old comedians? He wondered. And then he asked himself why anyone keeps anything, and the answer came down to 2 things: necessity and memory. Were these things which seemed to have no common purpose tucked neatly away because deep within he thought he might need them later, or were they souvenirs? If they were memories, they seemed somewhat personal, even heartfelt. They were human souvenirs, he thought to himself, a kind of something that might be kept if it was striving to be human. Grendel hated humans and wanted all of them gone, yet deep inside this essential part of him, he clung to human wants, desires, even dreams. They wandered the endless serpentine hallway through the pale, ghostly light, and with every step they found more of the flotsam and jetsam of Brady's memory. With every step forward, the anger and remorse he felt grew more distinct. His heart beat more quickly as he passed 100 rooms, 1,000. Time seemed to have no meaning within this place. Instead of time, there was something else. If time was a river, Brady was on the riverbank, aware of it in the distance, but no longer immersed in it. Was that a woman weeping in the distance? What could cause such bereavement? Who could carry on such a demonstration of woe for so long? In a place away from time, nothing lasted at all, and it continued forever, all at once. The penknife slid deeply into one cell wall, and this time the cell wall resisted. It did not easily give way to the pressure of the wrist as all of the others had. This one fought back, and Brady could feel the knife twist in his hand like someone on the other side was pushing it away, like the flesh itself was rebelling against him. Not easily deterred, Brady had the sense that urgency was the only thing that mattered. Somewhere outside, Kaylee, Joe, Dr. Grindle, Bjorn were probably facing the new monster, who must be Brady Grendel. Who knew what new form the monster had taken from Brady's fears and worries, from his loves and hatreds? Brady hoped that deep down the monster had to rely upon the physical attributes and the emotional responses of his host, and he was no weak dog or beaten man. He tried pushing the blade into the cell wall with more force, but it only fought back with equal pressure. He tried slashing at it, but to no effect as the blade bounced off the wall like rubber. Both he and Ben noticed that whenever the blade touched the cell wall, the sound of growling intensified, only to wane again when he withdrew the blade. And then Brady remembered the password from Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and the way into all caves of wonder. "Open sesame," he commanded. "I always say that when I want to get in somewhere," he thought. An open doorway appeared in front of them. They stepped into the chamber. It was darker than all the other chambers, and when the slit behind him heeled shut, it was pitch black. Brady fished around in his pockets and withdrew a 3 LED headlamp and held it up like a flashlight. The chamber was cavernous, and as they walked, it was the first time they could hear no thrumming at all. Instead, what pervaded the air and their senses was the sound of music. As they moved toward what Ben explained was Bach's Toccata and Fugue in G minor, they saw a small living room complete with a suite of comfortable furniture, a widescreen television, and soft lighting. In the distance, they saw a window into a kitchen where the smell of roasting turkey emanated and filled their senses. A small fire was burning in the fireplace, and several beautiful paintings from various time periods were displayed upon the walls. "What is this place?" Brady asked aloud. "Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this was where the real Grendel spends his days. Remember, Brady, he's not really alive, but he knows you better than anyone else. He will try to trick you." Brady was now in the living room, examining the paintings. They seemed to be real and not copies. But how did Van Gogh's Starry Night get inside the mind of a monster? Yet another painting was Rembrandt's Night Watch, smaller, of course. And there was the album art to Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, complete with the hermit holding his lantern. Upon closer inspection, he could tell that these were incomplete. Faces were not fully painted, and colors were wrong, less vivid than they should be. Everything about the paintings seemed like they were approximations of paintings only. There was a large bookshelf in the middle of the two paintings, and it stretched from ceiling to floor in its walnut and cherry glory. Among the tomes on the shelves were the works of Shakespeare, Dante, Cervantes, and Dickens, all carefully alphabetized, no one volume sticking out any further than any other. Brady recognized one of his favorite books and withdrew Don Quixote. It was bound in leather and had gold lettering. When he opened it, its spine cracked, as though it had never been opened before. It would indeed be a tedious read, however, because all of the pages were blank. Brady put the book back on the shelf and walked over to the television, picking up the remote control. He switched it on and began to look through the channels, one after another, channel after channel. They all displayed the same program, an episode of South Park that kept looping back upon itself, repeating the same minute of the show over and over again. He switched it off and understood everything. This was his home, his true abode. This was the home he would have had if his father had never died. He couldn't allow himself to imagine this. No one should have to experience this. If this was his home, it was Grendel's home, and therefore the monster's lair. The other Grendel in the epic of Beowulf lived in a cave deep within a mountain and away from the world of men. So this monster lived in his own kind of cave and tried to create a world that approximated the one he longed to control. Our living rooms are our modern caves, he thought. "Come on in, honey, supper's almost ready." It was his mother. "Go wash your hands, Brady. I've made meatloaf and potatoes, your father's favorite. Well, he'll be home in a few minutes. Go and wash your hands so we can eat together as a family." Brady stood as still as a statue. He was in his home, the home he would have known if his father had lived. She was here as well, and the world seemed somehow better. There was a smell of fresh food in the kitchen and the photos of the family on the wall. Brady lingered near them and examined them closely. There was one of his father and him sitting in kayaks in Orrington, both of them smiling widely. There was another of the whole family walking up a trail at Mount Cadillac on Mount Desert Island, the Porcupine Islands in the distance. Still another was of Brady and his dad working on a Pinewood Derby car for Cub Scouts. Except none of these ever really happened. They should have, but they didn't. Brady walked down the hallway toward his old room, the one he had before his father died, and they had to move to an apartment because Mom couldn't afford a mortgage any longer. As he entered his room, he saw it not as it was then, but as he would have it today, with AC/DC and Five-Finger Death Punch posters on the wall, a large screen television, a laptop in the corner, along with a whole wall of music CDs. He took one down from the shelf and opened it to find it empty, then another and another. All of them were empty, and no music would play here. He sat on the edge of his bed to look into the mirror and found the bed was solid wood. The mirror didn't even reflect his image. He heard the door close in the living room. "Brady, come on in. Dad's home," his mother called. His heart hastened and became a frightened bird cased within his ribs. Sweat began to form in small beads on his forehead. His father had been dead for years now, but here he was, somehow alive again. Each step toward the living room was torture. He emerged from the hallway to see his father sitting in his chair looking at the Bangor Daily News. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Come on over here and talk to your old man." Brady said nothing and obeyed his father, sitting on the edge of the couch next to his dad's chair. His father put the paper down and looked at him, smiling all the while. And then he reached out and lightly punched his son on the shoulder. "That's for nothing. Now do something," he said jovially. "Hi, Dad," Brady said. "What'd you do to change the world today?" asked his father. "Oh, nothing," he answered. "Well, you must have done something," he said casually, picking up his paper. "Well, at the moment I'm saving the world from a monster I created named Grendel. He wants to destroy all human life on Earth." "That's nice," his dad said. "I can see you've been reading again. What an imagination." His mother came into the living room. She was wearing an apron and a dress that he'd never seen her wear in life. "Dinner's ready. Let's eat, you two." Brady sat down and cut a piece of meatloaf with his knife, bringing it to his lips. It was warm and moist and heavy. He savored it. He hadn't had meatloaf in months. His mother and father exchanged pleasantries while Brady sat quietly taking it all in, observation mode strictly enforced. "But we need to get to bed early tonight, son, if we're going to go hunting in the morning," his father stated while chewing a mouthful of potatoes. Brady froze and stared at his father. "Hunting? What's the matter with you?" his father asked. Brady didn't answer. He lost his grip on his fork, and his mother told him to pick it up. He had to get down on all fours to retrieve it, and as he did, he heard a voice. "Brady, this isn't real. Your parents are dead. Wake up. Don't lose yourself in this. It isn't real." It was the voice of the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. The spell was broken. For a few blessed moments, Brady had forgotten about the abandonment, about the death of his parents, about the rise of Grendel from his own anger, and about his purpose in this place. He got out from under the table and stood up. His parents were still there, but they were no longer as he had previously seen them. His father was a skeleton with a foolish macabre grin, and his mother was slumped over the plate of meatloaf, obviously dead, her face flat down on the plate. "I'm sorry, Brady," said the book. "It's okay. It's not really them," said Brady. Immediately the scene changed, and he found himself in a very familiar place. His sanctum sanctorum, his growlery, his fortress of solitude, his bat cave. There were the giant monitors on the wall, rows of computer banks full of flashing lights and weaponry and tools of various advanced designs. A large chair that was an exact replica of Captain Kirk's from the original series of Star Trek sat in the middle of the room. Brady walked over and sat down in it. This was the place he always went to in his mind when he needed to solve puzzles. "Computer, where's Grendel?" he asked. Clicking and clacking sounds, hums and beeps sounded. And then, with the sound of an old dot matrix printer running, he heard the voice of the Enterprise's computer say, "Grendel is in 2 places simultaneously. He is in the river and also all around us." "Computer, show me the world through his eyes." The large view screen in front of him turned blue, and then showed a high-definition view of the river and in the form of Kaylee at the edge of the water. She had both feet in the water at the river's edge, and she was holding on to the cord he had lowered for her. She was readying to make the connection. He could see through the monster's eyes that Grendel was approaching her with great rapidity. Soon he would be upon her. Brady completely understood his intent. If he was going to do this thing, he'd better do it now. "Computer, I'm ready to face my fears. Please, open the portal." "Portal opening," said the computer. "Brady," said the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, "be brave." On the wall opposite the view screen, a round, white-edged portal began to form from the center, whirling in circles, widening slightly with each turn. Brady knew he was stepping out of the safe zone in his mind and into the insane part, the part that all people keep in check and hold inside. He was stepping into his own private Tartarus, taking only an old paperback and his imagination. After he stepped through, the portal closed. Immediately he was enveloped in chaos. 1,000 figures swirled around him. There was Susan, the first girl he had crushed on, and she was giving him an ugly glare. There was his science teacher, Mr. Page, marking an F on a paper with his name on it. There was his friend Noah, shouting out, "I hate you, you stink!" He saw Hugin limping on the ground with a broken wing, and Joe in his bed, his face gray and ashen, his mouth open in death. 1,000 what-ifs whirled past him, and he was reminded in The Wizard of Oz, and the moment when Dorothy's in the tornado, and all the things in the world fly by her window. There were fears here he had forgotten, like the one where he thought his mother had left him alone in the store, and he screamed and cried until a kind person brought him to the service desk. There was the fear that he had cheated on a test because he had accidentally seen an answer on another person's paper. There was the fear that he would never be good enough for anything because he was fat and short and had a high-pitched voice, and that no one anywhere would ever stoop so low as to love him. Swirling in a soup of anger, the fears intensified, and whenever one came close to him, his heartbeat quickened and his anxiety heightened. These things were real to him. These were his fears brought to life. "Grendel, I know who you are," he shouted over the wind of panic. "You're too late," shouted the monster. Out of the chaos of swirling embodied pains and fears, the monster flew out towards him. They grappled and fell into the long, dark chasm, a bottomless hole in the Tartarus of Brady's mind. End of chapter.